Say it again. The issue is not that it's synthetic and that it's bad. Say synthetic bad. Synthetic thiamine HCl is just fine. There are certain definite examples where a synthetic pure form is fine in the body, is going to work the same way. And then there's a vitamin E where it is not for those reasons, okay? So that's why it's so hard to make these broad statements like synthetic is bad, natural is good. Whole foods.
If only it was that easy.
Yeah. And
this is Generation Health. We bring you the latest news, cutting-edge research, and time-tested best practices helping you live a longer, healthier life. With me at the big table, we've got Dante DiMatteo, PharmD, Joey DiMatteo, PharmD, board-certified clinical nutritionist, Mike number 4, Josiah Schweinberg.
Yes.
And I'm Tyler Andrews, your host. I'm excited. Everybody's here.
it's nice.
This is good.
It's a big party.
Yeah.
It's a big party.
And you know what?
What?
You are here. The listener, the viewer.
I thought there was somebody else.
Welcome.
I was like,
That was beautiful.
Dante's checking to see who's walked in his house without us
just
knowing.
making sure.
Oh my goodness. We are doing a question and answer episode. You guys are so good about sending us questions, and I appreciate that. We have, 5, 6, I don't remember exactly here, questions that we're going to get to about a whole range of topics. But first, if you have a question that you want answered, please email us. Questions at askjoedimatteo.com. That's questions at askjoedimatteo.com. That guarantees that I'm going to see it, and we will get it scheduled for a future episode. I think most of these were emailed to us. A couple might be comments on the videos. If you want, you can always leave a comment in the video. We try to answer those as well. But let's just dive right in. This question is from Catherine. Catherine said, I'm 81 and I have a history of AFib, including a heart ablation 14 months ago. I currently take Xarelto, torsemide, and Lipitor. Since coenzyme Q10 is known to interfere with blood thinner warfarin, is it also a concern for those of us taking Xarelto? Thank you, Catherine. Well, thank you, Catherine. All right. So is CoQ10 a problem with Xarelto?
so she is correct in that there is a potential issue with CoQ10 and warfarin specifically. Warfarin works kind of like a seesaw. So on one side, warfarin pushes down to delay blood clotting. And on the other side, there's vitamin K that pushes up on it to promote clotting. So because CoQ10 is structurally similar to vitamin K, the thought is that your liver almost views this like some sort of vitamin K mimic. So to what extent this can cause issues is very much, up for debate, but it is worth considering, especially in the context of, maybe adding CoQ10 or adding a really high dose or those situations specifically. A good analogy here, and something you hear more frequently with, I know her question's not directly talking about warfarin, but this spinach issue. Okay. So there's nothing inherently wrong with spinach. Spinach is a health promoting food. But again, this is something that can very much change the effect of the drug warfarin while taking it. So
because spinach has a lot of K?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. The issue isn't that the person eats too much spinach to be well controlled on warfarin. The issue is just that if you were suddenly, if you were well controlled on warfarin, which takes a lot of drug monitoring and blood level monitoring, if you were to add a large amount of this, so a large amount of vitamin K, that would then throw off, how the drug would be functioning. And so again, it's not that CoQ10 would have the same magnitude of effect. It's just that, this is kind of how we're looking at it.
You just want to avoid that. But that's not so
right. And
so that's the extra. That's the bonus.
That's the bonus. She kind of wrapped those together. And so essentially we just need to now look at her particular anticoagulant, and that's the Xarelto. So Xarelto is distinct in that it doesn't have all the messiness in its mechanism like warfarin. And so because it just inhibits one specific clotting factor, it bypasses all of this vitamin K issue.
Got it.
So there's no issue then with the CoQ10 mimicking vitamin K, because we're just talking about a completely separate pathway, if you will. Now, CoQ10 does in and of itself also possess mildly, mild antiplatelet properties, but this is again different, and this is much less of an issue. For most people, it's not going to be an issue at all. So again, one of those things worth mentioning, one of those things that if you Google, you'll see some mechanism as to how CoQ10 can act,
theoretically.
Yes. But as far as, hard outcomes, adverse effect reporting, all of those sorts of ends of the spectrum, no issues, with antiplatelet activity. No reason to think that we're going to be increasing bleeding risk.
Am I correct in thinking that she says she's on Lipitor? I seem to remember CoQ10 being a good thing to add when you are taking Lipitor. Is that, am I remembering right?
And I'm assuming that's why she's asking about that supplement
right.
Specifically. Yeah, I think it's just key to understand that whenever you talk about blood thinning, largely or broadly, that it is typically prudent and accurate to say, well, this supplement is a blood thinner, or this new medication I may be on is a blood thinner, and I'm on a blood thinner, so they're additive. I think that's always important to kind of go through. So related to, again, warfarin is just such a specific mechanism that then when you get one level deeper, it doesn't matter. So I think, though, again, back to the kind of broad blood thinning aspect, CoQ10 is not a concern. But I'm assuming, if you're kind of listening and you're buying supplements, there are a few still to watch out for. And even though it's not an actual interaction, it just can have some of that additive effect. So just be careful with fish oil. Definitely would be number one. It can reduce platelet aggregation. So like many things, we typically aren't recommending mega doses anyway. And typically at lower doses, you're okay. But just something to be aware of. Ginkgo is another one.
Okay.
And also turmeric and curcumin. And sometimes that doesn't quite, add up because you're not using it for anything cardiovascular. You're using it for pain. I'm taking this pain, but also like with any of the NSAIDs, it's always something just to be aware of. So good on the CoQ, just watch those other ones.
Love it. Love it. I hope that helps, Catherine. Thank you for watching. Okay, we got a question from Rose. This one was emailed to us. Rose said, I'm 74 and have been taking high doses of vitamin D3, 10,000 IUs per day, and B12 for over a decade. Wow. Recently, a new blood panel showed both levels were about 15% above the normal range. My doctor had me cold turkey quit the B12 and drop the D3 to only 1,000 IUs. Since making those changes, I felt lightheaded and off balance. Now that my doctor has suggested I take half my original dose, I'm feeling better. Is it possible that my body has adapted to those high levels over the years and such a drastic reduction threw my system off?
That's definitely a good question. I think, being in the pharmacy end, we so often hear of things that potentially could possibly be related to starting a med or starting a supplement or vice versa, coming off of one of them. And kind of the first place that my mind goes often, because I'm so used to the question, is, are you sure these things are really related? Like you may just be kind of grasping at straws in a sense of, well, this changed and all I can think. And that is where you should start.
Right.
But at the same time, there definitely is the potential for some accuracy to that statement. So first, it's not a black or white answer because vitamins don't create dependence the way that medications can. And that can just be even physiological dependence. So stopping B12, lowering your vitamin D is not going to produce like a physiological withdrawal of any kind. Like even if you usually think of like drugs of abuse when you're talking that way, but even an SSRI, things that have very clear physiological effects. So we're not talking about a black or white yes answer to this question. However, when you talk about something, a supplement that you've been on for what she said,
a decade.
Okay. So
at a high level too.
Yeah. There's still an element where it definitely can be true that your body certainly has created sort of a homeostasis or a steady state or balance over time. So you've been taking D3 10,000, you've been taking high dose B12, and you've been taking it for a decade. So there's definitely a good chance, and it makes physiological sense that your body kind of settled into an equilibrium. Okay. And I think the key is, and she's kind of touching on it as the question went on, the B12 was stopped completely. Okay. And the D, while not stopped completely, was, dropped to 10% of where it was.
90% reduction.
Yeah. And then I think the key is then look at what's from an experimental standpoint that you went back on half the dose and you've been feeling better. So I think that a couple layers, but number one, it's not black or white, but it does make a lot of sense. And I think the fact that you kind of did, along with your doctor, kind of those half doses that the basically the experiment kind of proved, kind of bore out.
Right.
And from another kind of angle, when we talk about normal ranges, we don't recommend that you just exceed, that you take mega doses and that you just, B12 is good. And we don't know of this. We don't know necessarily exactly what happens when it's too high. So just blow it out. And,
right.
Vitamin D, we do know that when you start getting up into serious elevations, that you can certainly have some issues related to bone health and calcium, et cetera. But at the same time, if you're talking 15% above normal lab ranges, again, we're always hesitant to say, well, I'm not saying the doctor gave you bad advice.
Right.
They're looking at things from a very clear and highly credentialed and educated standpoint. Like, it makes sense that levels are high, you're taking these supplements, and he's still not really sure where do these come from. Like, is this really good for you? And that there's always that hanging out there. So my ultimate point on kind of this part of this would just be your levels were high. Coming down makes sense and you feel better, but at the same time, you weren't doing harm. You weren't at risk. You weren't, at 120, 150 on your vitamin D, et cetera. So I think you can feel comfortable about where you've been in the last decade. And I think that on these half doses, if you're feeling better, why push it?
Yep.
But at the same time, you were not harming yourself. You were not in some state of concern from a standpoint of toxicity.
I love that she was able to talk to her doctor, and her doctor was cool with, no, let's go back to half the doses just to see if that helps alleviate that. That kind of working with the practitioner is always something we want to see more of.
Yes.
I wish more doctors were that way. Rose, I hope that helps. Thank you so much. And we talked separately. Congrats on still being an OR nurse. That's pretty cool. All right. This question is from Diane. Diane said, my husband was prescribed metformin to be taken at night. I do not want him to be that guy taking pills out at dinner in a restaurant. Can he take it in the morning after breakfast? Oh, come on, Diane. That's mean. Sometimes you got to take a pill at night. It's not a big deal. Oh, okay. Anyway, sorry. Don't listen to me though. I don't know anything about anything. What do we got? Is this an okay change?
So the short answer is that the timing of metformin, in order to get the most out of it, the timing does matter. And so a lot of times maybe what's happening behind the scenes is your provider is matching the dosing possibly with your specific blood sugar needs, your specific metabolic needs. Now, the caveat to that is that adherence is also incredibly important. The steady state of the drug concentration in the blood over the long term is going to be most important. So if this nightly dosing does not work for somebody, or they're 60% compliant, 40% compliant, that's a completely different conversation to have.
Yeah.
And so in that case, Diane's husband, if we find out he's just not taking it, he just can't deal with that, he doesn't want to bring it, then that's something you go to your provider, or you go to your provider with that information and say, hey, let's kind of maybe shift some things to match my lifestyle, my behavior. Now, I think to switch gears a little bit, to riff on this some, on the part that I think we find most interesting, it's just more so why, the why behind the different timing administrations and why that might be important. So there is something called the dawn effect, or the dawn phenomenon.
DAWN?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Not like, never mind.
The dawn.
The dawn.
The dawn.
Not the Italian version.
The dawn.
Got it.
So let's pretend for a moment that he was prescribed the extended release formulation. We are, if you might be wondering why would somebody take the extended release formulation before bed, after the meal, before bed? What's happening overnight? Why might that be important? Why isn't that important?
Metformin is a blood sugar control medication,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's the main goal,
Right.
in taking it. So back to that dawn effect, between around 4 a.m. and 8 a.m., the body is kind of undergoing this change, this regulatory process. So to wake you up, essentially a surge of counter regulatory hormones are released. So things like glucagon, cortisol, growth hormone. These hormones temporarily will increase insulin resistance. And so this is a signal for your liver to essentially dump glucose into your bloodstream. So for one, kind of patient type, or, maybe this is the vast majority or whatever the case, I don't know that answer specifically. Regardless, in diabetics, this is where you'll see a severe morning blood sugar spike. And that's kind of what we want to avoid. So this might be, again, as we riff on this might be why the extended release formulation was chosen and timed for the evening dose. The ER tablets, they're made in a very fancy way that allows essentially the active ingredient to disperse slowly, meaning that the drug doesn't necessarily the drug doesn't reach its maximum concentration in the blood until about 7 to 8 hours after you actually take it.
Wow.
And so if you take it at dinner or bedtime, that means that this peak therapeutic window kind of aligns better with that 4 a.m. surge in those hormones that we just mentioned. And so then you hope that over time we're suppressing this dump from the liver that we mentioned and preventing this morning surge of blood glucose that may have been measured. So it kind of just leaves him to be better protected overnight, to kind of say it simply. Now, again, we want to make sure that they're taking their medication in the first place. So if we look at something like the IR formulation, if you're taking the standard immediate release metformin during the day, the strategy changes. Historically, we've told these patients to just take it with their first bite of food. We want to prevent GI upset, but we're now seeing that in order for the drug to yield the best results, it's important to take it 30 to 60 minutes before the meal.
Okay.
Now, again, adherence is everything. And there are a lot of people who will stop taking it because of, how crummy it makes their stomach feel. And so in that case, if you are taking it with the first bite of food, that's not the end of the world, right?
It's better than not taking it at all.
Yes. You might just get this little bit of benefit based on, the game of averages here. If you can push that to about 30 to 60 minutes. Again, there's a whole kind of complex process that occurs actually in the gut that we now know might, again, lead to some of these better results as it relates to metabolic health and blood sugar. But again, we just want to make sure that, if you're somebody that's maybe newly prescribed this medication, we just want to make sure you're adapting to this change. And I don't know how long he's been taking it, but it sounds like maybe this is a newish thing. I just think we want to make sure we're tolerating it well, make sure it jives with your lifestyle. And if it doesn't jive with your lifestyle, educate a little bit on why maybe this is a sacrifice worth making.
Yeah. All right. So if I understood you, you said it's probably a good idea to take it in the evening as prescribed because it was probably prescribed that way for a specific reason.
And it's probably the extended release form.
Probably the extended release, the dawn effect, all that jazz. And that if it's not working and you can't adhere, talk to your doctor, figure out how you can adhere, because that's far more important than the timing ultimately.
And that doesn't mean if you change, it's not going to not work.
Right. Right.
So.
It's just the maximum, trying to get the most you can out of the medication.
Right.
All right. Well, that was cool. Diane, I hope that helps. Be nice to your husband and let him take his pills when he's supposed to, even if it's in public. This question is from Shelly. Shelly let us know that she's in Hickory, Pennsylvania. So, hey, Shelly. She said, "Hi guys, what nutrients does Provigil drain from our bodies?" Thank you, Shelley. Dante, what's going on?
So Provigil or modafinil, it's used to essentially treat excessive daytime sleepiness. So these are for specific conditions in adults like narcolepsy. It can be used as an add-on in sleep apnea. It can be used in shift work disorder. So anything where sleep-wake is kind of messed up, causing, excessive daytime sleepiness. This is definitely an instance where it can be used. Now, it is an atypical stimulant, so it can very much, enhance focus, enhance alertness, and again, kind of do exactly as as you would hope.
It's well named.
Right. So circling back to her question, there's a lot of, with medications like this, people are often afraid of different issues that can arise. There's this state of, people think what would almost be characterized as like hypermetabolism when using a stimulant like this or Adderall or those kind of things.
Sure.
So I think logically you might assume you would run into, some of those issues. But in this case, it's not really inducing like a massive systemic stimulation like the amphetamines would. It's because of its action on dopamine, more focused on dopamine reuptake. It just kind of gently nudges on this these wakefulness promoting circuits.
Sure.
And so, just I guess not quite as much of a heavy hitter in that sense. So one issue that often comes up is the concern for magnesium depletion. It's simply a myth that this drug biomechanically can, drain essentially magnesium from your kidneys. So issues that pop up like jaw clenching, for example, resulting in tension headaches and that sort of experience, they are driven centrally, as it relates to the brain and not necessarily this imbalance or loss or change in electrolyte concentration or magnesium concentrations.
Right.
So don't have to worry about that. Now, if you were in a situation where you are having tension headaches presenting as migraines, let's say you add magnesium. And so magnesium might help with those headaches. So you might then kind of jump to the conclusion that, well, maybe I was deficient in magnesium to some extent. But again, just doesn't quite work that way. So again, I'm maybe assuming at some of the things that she's hinting at, but magnesium naturally dampening the neural excitability that kind of happens and what causes the jaw stimulation and tension headaches. Magnesium working to affect that is just a separate kind of deal here. Also, when thinking about this, what do we call it? Hypermetabolism.
Yeah.
You might also think that you might find yourself in a situation where dehydration is possible. Now, again, another instance to put her mind at ease. Provigil is not going to be a diuretic really in any capacity. So it's not having some, strenuous effect on the kidneys to expel water, for example. It can just, again, just by the nature of the mechanism, it can just increase or cause some mild sympathetic autonomic arousal. So it's almost like this low grade fight or flight state.
Ooh.
And so because of this, you can experience some dry mouth, for example, but the perception of this is not related to electrolytes. It's not reflective of nutrient loss. It's not indicative of that. It is just more, again, when you think about it, think about the central nervous system, just this fight or flight state that occurs. Right. There's a whole separate conversation around those neurotransmitters and those systems that cause that. But, this is a more behavioral dehydration sensation than it is a pharmacological one. Also, because this med can also have an effect on appetite, it can definitely make you less hungry. any sort of subsequent issues with mineral concentration, B vitamins, electrolytes, like we said, a lot of those are just secondary to consuming less, hydrating less, eating less. Kind of makes sense. It almost sounds too rudimentary as you talk through it, but again, not related to any sort of like speeding up of the metabolism or frequency of urination or this strain on the kidney. So the bottom line is, taking a medication like this, any sort of stimulant type agent, just try to aggressively hydrate. Do your best to not, change your diet as much. Try to set reminders or anything that helps you stay a little more adherent to a regular eating schedule. I think that is good advice for anybody. But they are what they sound like. They're more behavioral changes that are occurring, and also behavioral changes that you can make to prevent some of these issues.
So in a literal sense, Provigil doesn't appear to drain any nutrients radically, but it can change your behavior in some ways that could present as if that was the case.
Yeah. Typically, when you talk about a draining of nutrients, you're really talking about a blocking of absorption with things like metformin and PPIs. So there is definitely truth to that in general. But I think, like Dante said, what Provigil's doing is increasing demand a little bit for things like B vitamins and magnesium. Only thing I wanted to touch on, because this is definitely a good question, but Provigil is still a pretty limited use medication relative to other stimulants and similar medications like Ritalin and Adderall. I think in the most simplest way, without getting into all the neurotransmitters, Provigil puts a mild, maybe to moderate demand on those same systems. Ritalin puts a moderate, and Adderall puts the highest demand. So everything that Dante covered about that, there's definitely, if you're on Adderall versus Ritalin versus Provigil, there's still no blocking of absorption. There's no depletion, but there is an increased demand. So when you're adding in things like, I'm suddenly kind of eating less because my appetite's been suppressed and I have more energy, so I'm just doing more. I'm not thinking about all those like lifestyle kind of things. Just be aware that it's probably a good idea to make sure you have B vitamins and magnesium on board. When you're on Provigil, sure. Ritalin, Adderall for sure.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it almost becomes like a semantic argument at some point.
Right, exactly.
But like there's not minerals, electrolytes, things like depleting, leaving your body in a literal
water
sense.
pill, yes.
But it doesn't mean that you don't worry about these things.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's not like, and we don't want to make it sound like Shelly asked a bad question either.
No.
It's just, but it is I get that. We get these types of questions, you know what I mean? The just kind of every other day, these concerns pop up, and they are very real ones. So
I love it. I hope that is helpful, Shelly. This next one, this is from Cheryl. Cheryl emailed us. She said, I followed the show for over 25 years. Wow. Thank you. And have always prioritized professional grade supplements. I'm hearing more from holistic practitioners that whole food fermented vitamins are superior to synthetics, which some claim are derived from coal tar. However, I don't understand how you could ever achieve the therapeutic megadoses like a vitamin C sorbate flush using only whole food sources like rose hips or amla fruit. I've never even heard of that. Can you explain the manufacturing differences between whole food vitamins and high quality professional brands you carry, and whether one is truly more assimilable than the other? That's another new word for me, assimilable. Okay, thank you, Cheryl. Guys?
Yeah, this is a good question. There's a lot of layers to it. I'll start with the coal tar.
I'd never heard that before.
Yeah. So, really where that comes, there is truth to it. So anytime there's truth, it can be expanded.
Okay.
Let's put it mildly. So yes, early chemistry, as we were basically discovering vitamins and how to first make them, yes, they did come from petrochemical intermediates. Okay. So that is true. Now, one more nuance to that. Well, if the final product is purified and it's 99.8%, ascorbic acid or thiamine HCl, does that matter? It's still, I get it. Okay. But the bottom line is they still were pure. And most importantly, today, they're not being made from that. There are I think we all know how expensive petrochemical and their byproducts are. So now the vitamins are made using fermentation, plant-based processes. So there definitely is truth to that, but it's historic. So getting maybe down to the whole foods vitamin concept. So essentially what you're talking about is that a given nutrient would come kind of or the theory would be found in nature, that it would have not only the actual vitamin that we're discussing, but it would have things like polyphenols and maybe trace minerals or flavonoids or enzymes. Okay, there is some validity to that has some basis. Whole foods like the different citrus fruits when you're trying to get a vitamin C or the acerola cherry. Okay, they contain ascorbic acid, bioflavonoids, rutin, quercetin. So there's definitely some belief and some basis there that these compounds can help stabilize vitamin C and maybe support some antioxidant recycling. So, for example, our formula does contain some rutin added in. So is it from the whole source? Is it this big, extract and it's no, but in terms of the functionality of rutin and how that's been studied, and it's one of the flavonoids that's naturally found alongside vitamin C, it is in there. So again, there's a basis here. And if you want this absolute black or white answer, like bashing one and purely going for the other, we're probably not going to give you that, but I'm trying to lay out all the nuance as you make a decision. So, whole food vitamins, okay?
Is this like greens powders or something like that?
Along those lines.
Okay.
Yes. So there's different kind of angles to take. There's the angle of is synthetic versus natural. Whole food versus like a USP pharmaceutical grade supplement. Those all have different nuances to them, okay? So for example, vitamin E. Synthetic vitamin E, DL alpha tocopherol has 8 stereoisomers, or basically 8 kind of like mirror versions that are still all vitamin E, but in the body, only one of those 8 is biologically identical to the natural form, to the form that your body actually can use. That's why you would see your most basic vitamin E, DL alpha tocopherol, 400 milligrams is $10 at Sam's Club, okay? And then you'll see, wow, this one is 400 milligrams of vitamin E, and it's alpha tocopherol. It's all tocopherols, and it's $40. Why is that? Again, that's an example of where you're kind of combining the natural with the not. So synthetic in the case of vitamin E, as D-alpha tocopherol, is a big issue. Is it because it's synthetic? Is the answer to that because it's synthetic? Not in my opinion. The answer is that it doesn't contain enough of the active tocopherols or isomers of vitamin E.
So it's literally a slightly different molecule.
Yes. So again, say it again. The issue is not that it's synthetic and that it's bad. So you synthetic bad. Synthetic thiamine HCl is just fine. There are certain definite examples where a synthetic pure form is fine in the body, is going to work the same way. And then there's a vitamin E where it is not for those reasons, okay? So that's why it's so hard to make these broad statements like synthetic is bad, natural is good, whole foods.
If only it was that easy.
Yeah. And then at the same time is an absolute, and we'll get into more detail, is whole food vitamin, is that a bad thing? Of course not. There are examples where it's good. So in giving this big, long-winded answer, hopefully you kind of understand what I'm getting to is ultimately that it's complicated. Yeah. And we'll give some examples of why, and then you do with it from there. So let's look at something like minerals, okay? So more synthetic, cheaper form, magnesium oxide. You say, hey, it's 100 milligrams, it's 200 milligrams. If you're taking it and you are absorbing some, it's not that it's a complete waste. But from a natural standpoint, minerals in foods are naturally chelated. means they're not just, it's not just free magnesium. It's bound to that oxide in the synthetic form. It's bound in chelated forms, which are found in good quality supplements, and in nature, amino acids, organic acids, different peptides. This binding improves absorption and makes sure that pathways aren't overloaded, so you can, again, maximize it. So ours is not natural in the sense that like it's taken out of a given plant that contains a lot of magnesium. Fair. It's not a whole food magnesium. But again, it's made to mimic. It's zinc bisglycinate, magnesium lysate and glycinate complexes. That's a mimic of how it exists in nature. And we don't just do it because nature sounds good and synthetic sounds bad. We do it because you absorb it better. And when you're talking maybe about thiamine HCl, synthetic in foods or natural form, all ultimately are absorbed the same way. It doesn't really matter. Then when you talk about magnesium or things like vitamin E, the nuance is everything. So again, I don't think it's, I've said it probably too many times, synthetic versus natural is not always the answer. Sometimes synthetic's fine. Whole food is never bad, but it can be limiting at times.
When people want to give you the simple, if it's synthetic, it's bad. If it's natural, it's good. It's way too simplistic of an answer. And it typically indicates that either they don't know what they're talking about or they don't think you can handle nuance.
Yes, exactly. Because whole food is always going to sound better. Natural is always going to sound better, but it's not always better. And let's look at one thing too, USP grade, like good quality, professional grade whole food supplements. Not just us, not just companies we work with. There are others, but they're not all supplement companies.
Right.
Okay. So what does USP mean? USP is not a government agency. They work with the government. They do, their standards are recognized by the FDA. But when you get a high level supplement, you are getting USP graded ingredients. And I think that's again, like, if you were going to have it compounded or it was going to go through a drug company, not that the FDA is always right, but that standard of USP is important related to supplements.
Absolutely. One last thing that she mentioned, she talked about, Cheryl in her question said something about therapeutic mega doses being easier from the synthetics and things like ours than from the Whole Foods supplements. Is that accurate?
Yeah. And just in a broad sense, I think she's saying, you take, how can I get, maybe mega doses isn't the right word, but maybe therapeutic for the semantics of it. Yes, it is the amount of a lemon or an orange, even extract to get 500 milligrams, let alone 1,000 of vitamin C would necessitate a lot.
Yeah.
So, and again, but there are cases where there is enough in the final product, how it's extracted, how it's processed. So that's not necessarily a deal breaker either. But in the standpoint of vitamin C, yes, we extract out the vitamin C. It's not whole food, and bioflavonoids are added in to mimic the nature. Minerals chelated in nature. Our minerals are chelated. They're not whole food or natural though.
Got it. Cheryl, I hope that helps. Thank you for that question. That was robust and gave us a lot of room to play. So thank you for that. If you have a question, we love them. Either drop into the comments down below or email us questions@askjoedimatteo.com. That's questions@askjoedimatteo.com. You can go to our website, askjoedimatteo.com, where you can find all the products we talked about today, all the supplements, a bunch of other great things like the rest of this show, other episodes from the past, or the show that started this that Cheryl's been listening to for 25 years, the Ask Joe DiMatteo Show, all there on our website, askjoedimatteo.com. If you learned something, please share this with somebody you know that needs to hear these things. That's the best way that you can help this show grow. Make sure that you're subscribed, make sure that you give it a thumbs up, but share it with people who need this information. All right, I think that's it for us. Josiah, Dante, Joey, I'm Tyler. We'll see you next time.